So, hello and welcome back yet again to Ivanhoe. I always feel like I should say it like tally-ho because, kind of sounds like it. That was probably a really silly thing to do, but oh well. I hope you guys are all doing good. I've been very busy this week. I'm reading this a few hours before it's supposed to go up, and it's going to be a fairly long chapter. Like, looking at it, this one might be one of our longer chapters. I went through and was like marking the chapters, mostly because I'm not so good with Roman numerals, so I don't want to mess up when I'm reading off the chapter number, because I could do that. I could do that really, really easy. But yeah, this one looks like it's going to be kind of a long chapter. But yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. I'm good at rambling. I've been really busy this week in World of Warcraft. I know not everybody's here for the World of Warcraft talk, but there's a big event that's going on between the server that I play on and another big roleplay server. And it's a yearly event. It's been going on for like the last 10 years, I think. And it's a charity event. And all week long, they have different tournament events, which made me think about Ivanhoe because, there's jousting tournaments and fighting tournaments. There's a cooking competition that's hilarious, that's kind of like Chopped. There's a big auction, there's a charity auction, and it's all for a very good cause, which is it's a charity called Blessings in a Backpack, and it's to make sure that no kid goes hungry in school. They make sure that everybody goes home with food for the weekend and for after school and school vacations, and it's just a really good cause, and they're on track to completely smash their donation goal, and it's only day 3, so that's awesome. So that's what I've been doing this week, and that's why I managed to get distracted enough last night that I didn't get the chapter read. That's all right. We can get this read, get it up, and all of that. But this looks like it's going to be a long one. I do like Wamba. I feel like Isaac is also a good character. I have high hopes for Rowena, but the main male characters that we've met so far, they're not nice. Also, I've been hearing lots more about the Ivanhoe TV shows and movies. Haven't seen any of them, but they do sound interesting. So, with all of that, as I babble on for like 10,000 years, I'm going to try to open this because I was feeling quite comfortable in the other room and under the fan. But the minute I got back into my room, now I'm sweating again. So, don't mind me as I sweatily read this little quote, and then we will jump into Chapter 6 of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. To buy his favor, I extend this friendship. If he will take it, so. If not, adieu. And for my love, I pray you wrong me not. From the Merchant of Venice. I think that was the wrong chapter. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. Sorry about that. As the Palmer, lighted by a domestic with a torch, passed through the intricate combination of apartments of this large and irregular mansion, the cupbearer, coming behind him, whispered in his ear that if he had no objection to a cup of good mead in his apartment, there were many domestics in the family who would gladly hear the news he had brought with him from the Holy Land, particularly that which concerned the Knight of Ivanhoe. Wamba soon appeared to urge the same request, observing that a cup after midnight was worth 3 after curfew. Without disputing a maxim urged by such grave authority, the Palmer thanked them for their courtesy, but he observed that he had included in his religious vow an obligation never to speak in the kitchen on matters which were prohibited in the hall. That vow, said Wamba to the cupbearer, would scarce suit a serving man. The cupbearer shrugged his shoulders in displeasure. I thought to have lodged him in a solar chamber, he said. But since he is so unsocial to Christians, then let him take the stall next to Isaac. Anyway, he said to the torchbearer, carry the pilgrim to the southern cell. I say to you good night, Sir Palmer, with small thanks for your short courtesy. Good night. And Our Lady's benison, said the Palmer, keeping his composure, and then his guide guided him forward. In a small antechamber, into which several doors opened, and which was lighted by a small iron lamp, they met a second interruption from the waiting maid of Rowena, who, saying in a tone of authority that her mistress desired to speak with the Palmer, took the torch from the hand of Anwald, and telling him to wait for her return, made a signal to the Palmer to follow. Apparently, the Palmer did not think it proper to decline this invitation the way he had the last, for, though his gesture indicated surprise at the summons, he obeyed without any question. A short passage and an ascent of 7 steps, each of which was composed of a solid beam of oak, led him to the apartment of the Lady Rowena, the rude magnificence of which corresponded to the respect which was paid to her by the lord of the mansion. The walls were covered with embroidered hangings, on which different colored silks interwoven with gold and silver threads had been employed with all the art of which that age was capable, representing the sports of hunting and hawking. The bed was adorned with the same rich tapestry and surrounded with curtains dyed purple. The seats had also their stained coverings, and one, which was higher than the rest, was accommodated with a footstool made of ivory, curiously carved. No fewer than 4 silver candelabras, holding great wax torches, soon served to illuminate this apartment. Yet not modern beauty could envy the magnificence of a Saxon princess. The walls of the apartment were so ill finished and so full of crevices that the rich hangings shook in the night air, and in despite of a sort of screen intended to protect them from the wind, the flames of the torches streamed sideways into the air like unfurled pennons of a chieftain. Magnificence there was, with some attempt at taste, but of comfort there was very little, and so being unknown was also unmissed. The Lady Rowena, with 3 of her attendants standing at her back, arranging her hair before she lay down to rest, was seated in the sort of throne already mentioned, and looked as if she had been born to exact homage. The pilgrim acknowledged her claim on this by a low genuflection. Rise, Palmer, she said graciously. The defender of the absent has a right to a favorable reception from all who value truth and honor manhood. She then said to her train, retire, all of you, except only Elgitha. I would speak with this holy pilgrim. The maidens, without leaving the apartment, retired to its farthest extremity and sat down on a small bench against the wall, where they remained mute as statues, though at such a distance that their whispers would not interrupt the conversation of their mistress. Pilgrim, said the lady after a pause, during which she seemed uncertain how to address him, you this night mentioned a name. I mean, she said with a degree of effort, the name of Ivanhoe. In the halls where by nature and kindred it should have sounded most acceptably, and yet, such is the perverse course of fate, that many of whose hearts must have throbbed at the sound. I only dare ask you where and in what condition that you left him, of who you spoke earlier? We heard that, having remained in Palestine on account of his impaired health after the leaving of the English army, that he had experienced the persecution of the French faction, to whom the Templars are attached." "I know little of the Knight of Ivanhoe," said the palmer with a troubled voice. "I would I knew him better, since you, my lady, are interested in his faith. He hath, I believe, surmounted the persecution of his enemies in Palestine, and is on the eve of returning to England, where you, lady, must know better than I what his chance would be of happiness." The Lady Rowena sighed deeply, and asked more particularly when the Knight of Ivanhoe might be expected in his native land, and whether he would not be exposed to great dangers on the road. To the first point, the palmer professed ignorance, and to the second, he said that the voyage might safely be made by way of Venice and Genoa, and from there through France to England. Ivanhoe, he said, was so well acquainted with the language and manners of the French that there was no fear of his incurring any hazard in that part of his travel. "Would to God," said the Lady Rowena, "he were here safely, and able to bear arms in the approaching tourney, in which the chivalry of this land are expected to display their addresses and valor. Should Athelstine of Coinsborough obtain the prize, Ivanhoe is like to hear evil tidings when he returns to England. How did he look, stranger, when last you saw him? Had disease laid her hand upon his strength and comeliness?" "He was darker," said the palmer, "and thinner than when he came from Cyprus in the train of Coeur de Lion, and care was heavy on his brow. But I approach not his presence, because he is not known to me." "He will," said the lady, "he will, I fear, find little in his native land to clear those dark clouds from his countenance. Thank you, good pilgrim, for your information concerning the companion of my childhood. Maidens," she said, "draw near. Offer the sleeping cup to this holy man, who I will no longer detain from his rest." One of the maidens presented a silver cup containing a rich mixture of wine and spice, which Rowena barely put to her lips. It was then offered to the palmer, who, after a low bow, tasted a few drops. "Accept these alms, my friend," said the lady, offering a piece of gold, "in acknowledgment of thy painful work and of the shrines that you have visited." The palmer received this boon with another low bow, and followed Elgitha out of the apartment. In the anteroom, he found his attendant Anwold, who, taking the torch from the hand of the waiting maid, conducted him with more haste than ceremony to an exterior and ignoble part of the building, where a number of small apartments, or almost cells, served as sleeping places for the lower order of domestics and to strangers of low degree. "In which of these sleeps the Jewish man?" said the pilgrim. "The unbelieving dog," said Anwold. "Kennels in the cell next to your holiness. St. Dunstan, how it must be scraped and cleaned before it's fit for a Christian again." "And where does Girth the swineherd sleep?" said the stranger. "Girth," said the servant, "sleeps in the cell on your right, the Jew on your left, and you serve to keep the child of circumcision separate from the abomination of his tribe. You might have occupied a better place had you accepted Oswald's invitation." "It will be well as it is," said the palmer. "The company can hardly spread any contamination through an oak partition." And saying this, he entered the cabin allotted to him, and taking the torch from the domestic's hand, thanked him and told him good night. Having shut the door to his cell, he placed the torch in a candlestick made of wood, and then looked around his sleeping apartment, the furniture of which was of the most simple kind. It consisted of a rude wooden stool, a still ruder hutch or bed frame stuffed with clean straw, and accommodated with 2 or 3 sheepskins by way of bedclothes. The palmer extinguished his torch and threw himself without taking off any part of his clothes onto this rude couch and slept, or at least retained his recumbent position until the earliest sunbeams found their way through the little gated window which served to admit both air and light to his uncomfortable room. He then started up, and after repeating his matins and adjusting his clothing, entered the room of Isaac the Jew, lifting the latch as quietly as he could. The man was lying in a troubled slumber upon a couch similar to that with which the palmer had passed the night. Such parts of his dress as he had laid aside the last night were disposed carefully around his person, as if to prevent the hazard of them being carried off while he slept. There was a trouble on his brow, amounting almost to agony. His arms and hands moved convulsively, as if struggling with a nightmare, and some ejaculations in Hebrew following were distinctly heard, again after a moment in English, or at least the mixed language of the country. For the sake of the God of Abraham, spare an unhappy old man. I am poor, I am penniless. Should your irons wrench my limbs asunder, I would not be able to gratify you. The palmer waited until the end of Isaac's vision, and then stirred him with his pilgrim's staff. The touch, probably associated, as is usual, with some apprehensions excited by his dream, made the old man startle up, his gray hair standing almost straight on his head, and huddling some part of his garments around him, while he held the detached pieces with the grip of a falcon. He then fixed upon the palmer his keen black eyes, expressing wild surprise and apprehension. "Fear nothing from me, Isaac," said the palmer. "I come as your friend." "The God of Israel requite you," said the Jew, greatly relieved. "I dreamed, but Abraham be praised, it was only a dream." Then, collecting himself, he added in his usual tone, "And what may it be your pleasure to want such an early morning with me?" "It is to tell you," said the palmer, "that if you leave not this place instantly, and travel not with some haste, your journey may be a dangerous one." "Holy Father," said the Jew, "who could it interest to endanger such a poor wretch as me?" "The purpose you can best guess," said the pilgrim. "But rely on this. When the Templar crossed the hall yesterday on this, he spoke to his Muslim slaves in the Saracen language, which I understand, and he told them this morning to watch your journey and to seize you at a convenient distance from the mansion, and then to take him to the castle of Philip de Malvision, or Reginald Fontainebleau. It is impossible to describe the extremity of terror which seized upon Isaac at this information, and seemed at once to overpower all of his faculties. His arms fell down to his side, and his head drooped on his breast, his knees bent under his weight, and every nerve and muscle of his frame seemed to collapse and lose energy. He sunk down at the foot of the palmer, not in the fashion of one who intentionally stoops, kneels, or prostrates himself, but like a man borne down on all sides by the pressure of an invisible force which crushes him to the earth. "Holy God!" was his first exclamation, folding and holding up his wrinkled hands, but without raising his gray head. "Oh, holy Moses! Oh, blessed Aaron! The dream is not dreamed for nothing, and the vision cometh not in vain. I feel their irons already on my sinews. I feel the rack pass over my body like the saws and harrows and axes of iron over the men of Rabbah and of the cities of the children of Ammon. Stand up, Isaac. Listen to me, said the palmer. Hugh viewed the extremity of his distress with a compassion in which contempt was slightly mingled. You have cause for your terror, considering how your brethren have been used in order to extort from their hoards, both by princes and nobles. But stand, I say, and I will point out to you the means that you may escape. Leave this mansion instantly, while its inmates sleep sound after last night's revelry. I will guide you by the secret paths of the forest, known as well to me as any forester that ranges it, and I will not leave until you are under the safe conduct of some chief or baron going to the tournament, upon whose good will you probably have the means of securing. As the ears of Isaac received the hopes of escape, he began gradually, inch by inch, as it were, to raise himself from the ground, until he fairly rested upon his knees, throwing back his long gray hair and beard, and fixing his eyes on the palmer's face with a look expressing both hope and fear, mingled with suspicion. But when he heard the concluding part of the sentence, his original terror appeared to revive in full force, and he dropped once more on his face, exclaiming, I possess the means of securing goodwill. Alas, there is but one road to the favor of a Christian, and how can the poor Jew find it, whom extortions have already reduced to the misery of Lazarus? Then, as if suspicion had overpowered his other feelings, he suddenly said, For the love of God, young man, betray me not. For the sake of the great Father who made us all, Jew and Gentile, Israelite and Ishmaelite, do me no treason. I have no means to secure the goodwill of a Christian beggar, were he rating it at a single penny. As he spoke these last words, he raised himself and grasped the palmer's mantle with a look of an earnest entreaty. The pilgrim extracted himself, as if maybe there was contamination in Isaac's touch. Wert thou loaded with all the wealth of your tribe, he said, what interest have I to injure thee? In this dress I am vowed to poverty, nor do I change it for aught save a horse and a coat of mail. Yet think not that I care for thy company, or propose myself advantage by it. Stay here if you will. Cedric the Saxon might protect you. Alas, said Isaac, he will not let me travel in his train. Saxon or Norman will be equally ashamed of the poor Israelite, and to travel by myself through the domains of Philip de Malvision and Reginald Fondeboeuf. Young man, I will go with you. Let us haste, let us gird our loins, let us flee. Here is your staff. Why will you wait? I tarry not, said the pilgrim, giving way to the urgency of his companion. But I must secure the means of leaving this place. Follow me. He led the way into the adjoining cell, which, as the reader knows, was occupied by Gurth the swineherd. Arise, Gurth, said the pilgrim. Arise quickly. Undo the postern gate, and let us out. Gurth, whose occupation, though now held so mean, gave him as much consequence in Saxon England as that of Erasmus in Ithaca, and he was offended at the familiar and commanding tone of voice assumed by the palmer. Isaac, leaving Rotherwood, he said, raising himself on his elbow and looking superciliously at him, without leaving his bed, and traveling in company of the palmer to boot. I should soon have dreamt, said Wamba, entering the apartment, of stealing away with a gram and a bacon. Nonetheless, said Girth, again laying down his head on the wooden log that he used as a pillow, both Jew and Gentile must be content to abide by the opening of the great gate. We suffer no visitors to depart by stealth at these unreasonable hours. Nevertheless, said the pilgrim, you will not, I think, refuse me the favor. And so saying, he stooped over the bed of the recumbent swineherd and whispered something into his ear in Saxon. Girth startled up as though electrified. The pilgrim raised his finger in an attitude of expressing caution and said, Girth, beware. Thou art wont to be prudent. I say, undo the postern. You'll know more soon. And with a haste Girth obeyed him, while Wamba and the Isaac followed, both wondering at the change in the swineherd's demeanor. My mule, said Isaac as soon as they stood outside of the postern. Fetch him his mule, said the pilgrim. And hearest thou, let me have another, that I may bear him company until he is out of this area. I will return it safely to some of Cedric's train at Ashby. And remember, he said, whispering something into Girth's ear. Willingly, most willingly it will be done, said Girth, who instantly left to execute the orders. I wish I knew, said Wamba, when his comrade's back was turned, what you Palmers learn in the Holy Land. To say our orisons, fool, said the pilgrim, to repent of our sins and to mortify ourselves with fasting, vigil, and long prayer. Something more potent than that, said the jester, for when would repentance or prayer make Girth do a courtesy, or fasting or vigil persuade him to lend you a mule? I trow you might as well have told his favorite black boar of your vigils and penance, and would have gotten as civil an answer. Go on, said the pilgrim. Thou art but a Saxon fool. Thou sayest well, said the jester. Had I been born a Norman, as I think thou art, I would have had luck on my side, and been next door to a wise man. Right then Girth appeared on the opposite side of the moat with the mules. The travelers crossed the ditch upon a drawbridge only 2 wet planks wide, the narrowness of which was matched by the straightness of the postern, and with a little wicket on the exterior palisade which gave access to the forest. No sooner had they reached the mules when Isaac, with hasty and shaking hands, secured behind the saddle a small bag of blue buckram, which he took his coat from, and he muttered, A change of raiment, only a change of raiment. Then getting upon the animal with more haste than he could have been anticipated from his years, he lost no time in disposing of the skirts of his gabardine as to conceal completely from observation the burden that he had put behind his saddle. The pilgrim mounted with more deliberation, reaching as he departed his hand to Girth, who kissed it with the utmost veneration. The swineherd stood gazing after the travelers until they were lost under the boughs of the forest path, when he was disturbed from his reverie by Wamba's voice. Knowest thou, said the jester, good friend Girth, that thou art strangely courteous and most unwontedly pious this morning? Were I a black prior or a barefoot palmer, to avail myself of thy unwonted zeal and courtesy, I would make more out of it than just a kiss on the hand if it was me. Thou art no fool thus far, said Girth, though thou arguest from appearances, and the wisest of us could do no more. But it's time for me to look after my charge. And saying this, he turned back to the mansion, followed by the jester. Meanwhile, the travelers continued to press their journey with a dispatch which argued the extremity of Isaac's fears, since people his age are seldom fond of quick motion. The palmer, to whom every path and outlet of the wood appeared to be familiar, led the way through the most devious paths, and more than once excited anew the suspicion of Isaac that he intended to betray him into some bunch of his enemies. His doubts might have been indeed pardoned, for, except perhaps the flying fish, there was no race existing on this earth, in the air or water, who were the object of such unremitting, general, relentless persecution as the Jews during this period. Upon the slightest and most unreasonable pretenses, as well as upon the accusations most absurd and groundless, their people and property were exposed to every turn of popular fury. For Norman, Saxon, Dane, and Briton, however much these races hated each other, they all contended which should look with the greatest hatred upon a people who it was accounted a point of religion to hate, revile, despise, plunder, and persecute. The kings of the Norman race, and the independent nobles who followed their example in all acts of tyranny, maintained against this devoted people a persecution of a more regular, calculated, and self-interested kind. It's a well-known story of King John, that he confined a wealthy Jewish person in one of the royal castles and daily caused one of his teeth to be ripped out, until when the jaw of the unhappy man was half disfurnished, he consented to pay a large sum which the tyrant had been attempting to extort from him. The little ready money, which was in the country, was chiefly in possession of this persecuted people, and the nobility hesitated not to follow the example of their sovereign in wringing it from them by every species of oppression and sometimes even torture. Yet the passive courage inspired by the love of money induced the Jewish people to dare the evils to which they were subjected, in consideration of the immense profit with which they were enabled to realize in a country as wealthy as England. In Court of Taxations, as already mentioned, called the Jewish Exchange, erected for the purpose of despoiling and distressing them, the people increased, multiplied, and accumulated huge sums of money, which they transferred from one hand to another by means of bills of exchange, an invention for which commerce is said to be indebted to them, and which enabled them to transfer their wealth from hand to hand and land to land, so that when threatened with oppression in one country, their treasure might still be secure in another. The obstinacy and avarice of this people being thus in a measure placed in opposition to the fanaticism and tyranny under those people whom they lived, seemed to increase in proportion to the persecution with which they were visited, and the immense wealth which they usually acquired in commerce, while frequently placing them in danger, was at other times used to expand their influence and to secure to them a certain degree of protection. These were the terms that they lived on, and their character, influenced accordingly, was watchful, suspicious, and timid, yet stubborn, uncomplying, and skillful at evading the dangers to which they were exposed. When the travelers had pushed on at a rapid pace through many devious paths, the palmer finally broke the silence. "That large decayed oak," he said, "marks the boundaries over which Front de Boeuf claims authority. We are long since far from those of Malvision. There is now no fear of pursuit." "May the wheels of their chariots be taken off," said Isaac, "like the host of those of Pharaoh, that they may drive heavily. But don't leave me, good pilgrim. Think but of that fierce and savage Templar with his slaves, They will regard neither territory, manor, or lordship in their hunt. Our road, said the palmer, should here separate, for it beseems not men of my character and yours to travel together longer than we need to. Besides, what succor could thou have from me, a peaceful pilgrim, against armed heathens? Oh, good young man, said Isaac, thou canst defend me, and I know you would. Poor as I am, I will requite it, not with money, for money, so help me Father Abraham, I have none, but money and recompense, said the palmer, interrupting. I have those, and I don't require them of you. Guide thee I can, and it may be even in some sort of way defend thee, since to protect you against a Saracen can scarce be counted unworthy of a Christian man. Therefore, I will see thee safe under some fitting escort. We are now not far from the town of Sheffield, where thou mayest easily find many of your people there with whom you can take refuge. The blessings of Jacob be upon thee, good man, said Isaac. In Sheffield I can harbor with my kinsman Zareth, and find some means of traveling forth safely. Be it so, said the palmer. At Sheffield, then we will part, and half an hour's riding will bring us within sight of that town. The half hour was spent in perfect silence on both of their parts, the pilgrim perhaps disdaining to address Isaac except by absolute necessity, and Isaac not presuming to force a conversation with a person whose journey to the Holy Sepulchre gave a kind of sanctity to. They paused on the top of a gently rising bank, and the pilgrim, pointing to the town of Sheffield beneath them, said, "Here's where we part." "Not until you've had my thanks," said Isaac, "for I presume not to ask you to go with me to my kinsman Zareth's, who might aid me with some means of repaying your good services." "I already told you," said the pilgrim, "that I desire no recompense. If, among the huge list of your debtors, thou will, for my sake, spare the gyves and the dungeon to some unhappy Christian who stands in thy danger, I will hold this morning's service to you well repaid." "Stay," said Isaac, catching hold of the pilgrim's garment. "Something I would do more than this, something for you. God knows I am poor. Yes, Isaac is the beggar of his tribe, but forgive me should I guess what you most lack right now." "If you were to guess truly," said the palmer, "it is what you cannot supply, even if you were as wealthy as you say you are poor." "As I say," said Isaac. "Oh, believe me, I say but the truth. I am plundered, indebted, distressed. Hard hands have wrung me from my goods, my money, my ships, everything that I possessed. But I can tell what you lack, and I may supply it too. Your wish, even now, is for a horse and armor." The palmer startled and turned suddenly towards Isaac. "What fiend prompted your guess?" he said. "No matter," said Isaac with a smile, "if it is a true one, and I can guess your want, and I can supply it." "Consider," said the palmer, "my character, my dress, my vow." "I know you Christians," said the Jew, "and that the novelist of you will take the staff and sandal in superstitious penance and walk afoot to visit the graves of the dead." "Don't you blaspheme me," said the pilgrim. "Forgive me," said Isaac. "I spoke rashly, but there dropped words from you last night and this morning that like sparks from flint, showed the metal within you. And in the bosom of that palmer's gown is hidden a knight's chain and spurs of gold. They peeked out as you stooped over my bed this morning. At this the pilgrim smiled. Were thy garments searched by as curious of an eye, Isaac, what discoveries could be made? No more of that, said Isaac, changing colors and drawing forth his writing materials quickly, as if to stop the conversation completely. He began writing upon a piece of paper, which he supported on the top of his yellow cap, without even dismounting his mule. When he had finished, he delivered the scroll in the Hebrew language to the pilgrim, saying, In the town of Leicester, all men know the rich man, Kiraj Jarim of Lombardy. Give him this scroll. He hath on sale 6 Milan harnesses, the worst of which would suit a crowned head, and 10 goodly steeds, the worst of which would mount a king were he to do battle for his throne. Of these he will give you a choice, with everything else that can furnish you forth for the tournament. When it's over, you return them safely, unless thou should have wherewith to pay off their value to the owner. But Isaac, said the pilgrim with a smile, dost thou know that in these sports the arms and steed of the knight who is unhorsed are forfeit? I may be unfortunate, and lose what I cannot replace or repay. Isaac looked somewhat astounded at this possibility, but collecting his courage, he said, No, no, no. It is impossible. I will not think on it. The blessing of our Father upon thee. Your lance will be as powerful as the rod of Moses. As he said this, he was turning his mule's head away, when the palmer, in his turn, took quick hold of the gabardine. Nay, nay, Isaac, you don't know all of the risk. The horse may be slain, the armor injured, for I will spare neither horse nor man. Besides, your people give nothing for nothing. Something there must be paid for. Isaac twisted in the saddle, like a man with a fit of colic, but with his better feelings predominated over those of which were most familiar to him. I don't care, he said. I care not. Let me go. If there is damage, it will cost you nothing. If there is usage money, Kirjath Jorim will forgive me for the sake of his kinsman Isaac. Fare thee well. Yet remember, young man, he said, turning about, thrust thyself not too forward into this vain hurly-burly. I speak not for endangering the steed and the armor, but for the sake of your own life and limb. Good mercy for your caution, said the palmer, again smiling. I will use thy courtesy frankly, and it will go hard with me that I require it. Then they parted, and each took different roads for the town of Sheffield. And that was the end of chapter 6. Okay. The language in that one got a little tricky. I was following mostly, but every once in a while I'm like, what on earth did I just read? Can I read that 2 or 3 more times so it sinks in? But yeah, it seems like the palmer, who I'm now starting to think is probably Ivanhoe, Mr. Knight of Ivanhoe. Although if he is, wouldn't Rowena, who said that they were childhood friends, have recognized him? I wonder how long he's been gone. Anyway, the palmer, who I have my suspicions about, mostly because all of the servants seem to serve him quickly and easily, took Isaac to a town to keep him from getting beaten to death. And now he's going to enter a tournament? I think that's where we're at. Anyway, this was a long one, so thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this very long chapter. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow.